Hello and welcome back to another DF Retro Direct. I still have my good friend Audi here with me, as you can see, and today our topic is something a little different. Basically, we want to talk about retro games that we discovered this year or sunk time into this year. The types of games that maybe we've seen them before or hadn't thought about them, but actually sat down and either played all the way through them or at least played enough to walk away impressed. And there's a lot of games to talk about, so yeah.
Yeah, because we've been spending a lot of time together this year. We've been producing a lot of the DF Retro content for 2020. And in between all this, we like to go and kind of retro game hunt and have some fun. So
retro game hunting is good fun.
Yeah, and then play them afterwards.
Exactly.
So we've been having a lot of new discoveries this year. So we figured it'd be fun to kind of do this.
So let's kind of bounce back and forth and take some turns. You want to start or you want me to start?
You're the host.
All right, let's
Please start, Mr. Linneman.
So, first game on the list. This is one I've been very familiar with for years, but I never really sat down to play it. It's Monster World 4. After last year's Monster Boy, which was my favorite game of 2018, I thought maybe it's time to actually play this game. And I picked up an original copy for the Mega Drive, and I sat down and I played through the entire game in about a week. I had heard about some tedious points. My first impressions back in the day, first playing it, were always, this feels a little bit repetitive. Right. But once I actually gave it a shot and sat down and played it, I was really impressed. I mean, the main thing is each of the 4 main areas that you go to sort of introduces a different mechanic and puzzle style design, and you have to use that to get like the water dungeon or the ice dungeon. You know, there's all these different things you have to take into account while navigating it. And I thought it was a really interesting game with a unique soundtrack and a really nice visual style. Just big, colorful sprites, and it just felt great to play. And it was much more interesting than I initially thought as a result.
I played that when it came out on the Virtual Console. As you remember, it came out translated for the first time, I think, on the Virtual Console.
That's right.
Yeah, I really fell in love with that game. And the last few years have really been good to Monster Boy, or Monster World, rather.
Yeah, the whole series, and Wonder Boy, Monster World, all that, they've kind of been bubbling up in the public consciousness. We got the remake of The Dragon's Trap.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, Monster World 4 then, it's definitely one of the most enjoyable games of the year from both retro and modern games for me. It does have its flaws, but it's solid.
Well, you said Monster Boy was your favorite game of 2018. How do you compare it to Monster World 4 then?
Monster Boy is significantly better overall. I love Monster World 4, but it's clear that the design has evolved significantly. And the overall level design and moveset in Monster Boy is just the next level. But they're both great. Obviously, you know, one came after the other many, many, many years later, so yeah.
It's
cool.
Definitely one of the most beautiful games on the system, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And it has more of a pastel look than usual.
Right, which fits the Mega Drive.
Right. But what about you?
Yeah, so one of the games I picked up this year that I've been looking for quite a few years. I mentioned it to you like last year at some point. Finally kind of got around to getting it because of Frank Matzke from Bethesda. Mentioned it to me. Fighting Spirit on the Amiga. So Fighting Spirit was a Spanish-developed game and kind of sought out to be a one-button fighter, for the most part, SNK rival on the Amiga.
So yeah, that's one of the problems with the Amiga is most games are designed for the different joysticks, like the Competition Pro.
Or keyboard.
Like that keyboard. But they typically focused on single-button action, and in platformers, up the jump.
Really don't like that.
I really don't like up the jump.
You actually buy a stick where you can change that.
Yeah.
You're that much against the up the jump.
Yeah, I got that from Monster Joysticks. Those guys have that cool little switch where you can switch the up to one of the buttons, so you actually don't have to up the jump. But yes, the fighting game. I mean,
so Fighting Spirit. You can use this. So later in the Amiga's life, they did support the CD32 controller.
Right.
And I think Fighting Spirit does, but it's very expensive. But yeah, when we were playing it, it looked very much like a home conversion of a Neo Geo game, a middle tier.
Yeah, I got a chance to play that on my Amiga here, and it's interesting because you got to keep in mind that the Amiga dates back to 1987 or so, but the sprites are surprisingly detailed. It looks really nice in motion, and it actually
has the Fatal Fury, like text, the font type.
It plays better than I expected for a one-button fighting game. So obviously it's lacking some depth, but it's a cool little game.
It's also one of the more valuable games on the system, so I was very happy to find for a good price.
Yeah, that's a rare thing, actually. Although speaking of valuable, I didn't get a chance to play it. You were nice enough to bring this along for me. The PC-98 version of Doom. The PC-98 being the NEC PC platform, very popular in Japan.
We'll get to that in the future.
We'll get to this in the future, but this is one of the highest end games in the system in the end. It obviously didn't go much further than this, but yeah, it's an amazing thing to see.
Yeah, so I got this from an old Imagineer employee that I know in Japan.
That's right, yeah, it was brought over by Imagineer, wasn't it?
I couldn't think of a better home than yours.
Yes, thank you. Exactly, this is great stuff. I love all versions of Doom. So, but yeah, for me though, another one I want to talk about is what you see behind me actually is Golden Axe 3.
Yes.
This is one that I'd always heard was terrible. The general consensus is that it's the worst in the series.
I always heard that too, and I think it had a limited release too, didn't it?
It was only released on cartridge in Japan, I think, and possibly like an Asian version. I have the Japanese version. But I don't agree with that. So yes, it has its flaws. The visuals can be somewhat grainy at points. But I think the core gameplay feels better than 1 and 2 on the Mega Drive. There's more frames of animation. The connections between the hits is stronger. They do a better job of, like, when you slash something, it really, you feel the impact a lot more. And it's just, there's actually, like, real parallax scrolling.
Yeah.
And, like, the sort of line scrolling effects everywhere, which were not in Golden Axe 1 and 2.
Yeah, I had always heard that this game was the worst in the series, and for me, I told you too when we were gonna play it that, like, why are we playing this one? The music, that's amazing.
The music is stunning. I mean, just listen to this. Right, for the Mega Drive, they tried to do some interesting things. I believe one of the composers that worked on Sonic CD was responsible for the tracks for this. To double check that, but the quality is great. The tracks are really interesting, so it just has this feel to it that I really liked, despite some of its flaws. I mean, there's definitely still issues with it, but I think it's probably my favorite of the Genesis conversions. I mean, there's, obviously there's the arcade game, The Revenge of Death Adder.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Which is
and never got back home.
A proper home port. So if you were, like, playing that in the arcade and then Golden Axe 3 comes out, this does feel like a step down, but on its own, taken years later, despite its flaws, I still really like it. I think it's better than history has painted it to be. Not that it's like Streets of Rage 2 quality or anything.
Right,
but it's still solid.
It feels more like a console game than the two first ones being arcade ports.
I agree. All right, what's next up for you?
So that, like, I am a huge fan of visual novels. I worked in the visual novel industry in Japan for quite a few years and had a lot of involvement in PC-98, obviously. One that I always wanted to get is Metal Slader Glory on the Famicom.
On Famicom.
A game by HAL.
That's right. It's by HAL of Kirby and many other games fame.
Right. And this game is very notable because it was made with the MMC5 mapper.
MMC5, was that used in anything else?
I'm not sure if it was used in anything else, but it is definitely the largest of the mappers. And the production of this game was very troublesome because they were trying to fit a graphic adventure of basically Super Famicom size on the Famicom.
Yeah, we loaded this up and played through it, and it does feature a lot of full screen graphics and again, it's a visual novel, so but you get a lot of, like, impressively detailed visuals at a time when the tile-based low memory NES or Famicom doing these types of graphics is not easy.
No, and it looks amazing. As you mentioned, we loaded it up because it did get a English fans translation this year, I believe.
That's right.
So I haven't been able to play for that yet, but I picked up the Japanese version finally. It is a little bit hard to get, but it is a fantastic looking game for the Famicom, and definitely one for visual novel fans. Even if you can't read it, pick it up if you see it.
And another great looking game that I picked up this year that I'm very happy with is Gaiares.
You son of a... Yeah.
So this is one where this year it received a re-release from Columbus Circle,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
I picked it up and then realized, okay, the cartridge itself, it's a fairly low quality repro. The cartridge, the PCB itself is just one of those AliExpress specials.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the correct voltage on it, which can potentially damage your system over time.
Allegedly.
But over time, it's either way, it's probably not the best idea to use this.
Unfortunately not. I've had some involvement with Columbus Circle over the years, personally, and their sourcing isn't the best, but it's a cost issue.
Of course. So, thankfully, someone reached out to me, and I managed to get a very good price. Or actually, I reached out to someone. I got a really good price on an actual legitimate version of Gaiares to add to my Mega Drive collection, and that's when I finally really sat down and played through it. And it's a game I'd always heard about, but never really spent a lot of time with. It's really good.
Yeah, it's by NCS from also Balkan fame, Langrisser, Lenas. Yeah, and follows suit. I mean, this is a fantastic looking game.
It has
great mechanical
killer
designs.
soundtrack.
Yeah.
And like things like the very first level, they do this thing where it's got this star field full of meteorites, I guess. And you're making your way through there, and you sort of end up discovering that, it's actually the rings around a large planet, and you're kind of flying through it. And it's a very cinematic kind of shot and really impressive looking, and it really highlights just how intense the game can be. And by the way, another feature of it that I really like is you always have these two options or so that you can get for your ship, but because when you start the game, you can actually choose how you want to use them. You can have modes where you aim them a certain way, or that they float with you and always fire forward, or they fire backwards, and you can control them in different ways. So it's kind of up to you to decide how you want to utilize these options.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really creative idea that adds a lot of variety and strategy to the play style, and it's something that kind of allows you to find what works best for you. So it's just excellent graphics, excellent music, a really cool progression. It's just an awesome shooter.
It's one of the most valuable games for the Mega Drive from Japan, but I will say that I'm one of the few that kind of prefers the re-release because of the new artwork they did for it by the original artist. But as you mentioned, there's some issues with the actual product, but I do at least appreciate that this game is now available for more people.
Yeah, I agree. That's really cool for sure. So what else is next?
Yeah, so you mentioned that someone reached out to you to give you Gaiares, and you helped me with this one because I told you about this many times that I am a huge fan and I'm a friend of Koji Hayama, who is the composer of Choaniki, also of NCS fame. And there's a game he did on the PC Engine called Ane-san.
Yeah, Ane-san.
Ane-san, which is a beat 'em up, all-female beat 'em up. And has a very interesting soundtrack, a rockabilly soundtrack that is really cool.
It's a very strange game.
It's very strange. It has, half the screen is the gameplay, and the other is basically dialogue, very reminiscent to in the English in River City Ransom.
Yeah, River City Ransom.
So
Kunio-kun games.
Yeah, the Kunio-kun games, which I'm also a big fan of. So yeah, this was an excellent pickup. I was so happy to finally get it because I've been looking for years, and you finally made that happen.
Yeah, and for a price that was
for a good price. Yeah, a reasonable price.
That's kind of the key with hunting this.
Well, we don't.
It's part of the fun.
Yeah, you and I don't really hunt games just for the value so much, but it just so happens that a lot of games we want are valuable.
Yeah, because many of them are good.
Yes,
but including another shooter that I got for PC Engine this year that you recommended.
Oh yeah,
which is
yeah.
Hanataka Daka.
Yes.
Which is.
How did you like that one?
I took a chance on that because of a nice price, and I really enjoyed playing it.
Yeah.
Big shooter fan, of course, and this one is just a beautiful PC Engine game.
It's great color use.
Gorgeous colored sprites and just excellent background detail. It just has a really nice personality to it.
A Taito game.
Yeah, exactly, and I love Taito. So I also picked up Mizubaku Daiboken, or like Liquid Kids, I guess is another Taito game. So there's two on PC Engine. Really beautiful, really fun little games.
Yeah, Hana Takadaka's music was done by Yamashita Kinyo from Castlevania and Power Blade fame. So
That's right.
That's why
amazing music.
very
as well.
good music.
So
The very first boss in that game is Abdullah the Butcher, which is a wrestler.
and that's it's a Hue card game as well.
Yes.
So, which a lot of the later games, the PC Engine was very focused on CD games. But the PC Engine sound chip is always something I've really liked.
I love that
There's
sound
a really
chip,
cool sound to it, and of course, Hanataka Daka also sounds really, really good.
Among the best, I'd say, of the Hue card
It's
soundtracks.
up there for sure, along with Batman.
Along with Batman.
Sunsoft Batman on there.
Batman picking up trash.
Yep.
So, John, I've been here in Frankfurt a lot this year. There's been many a schnitzel between us. So, I felt like I kind of had to get in shape eventually. And luckily, I found a game. Do you know Billy Blanks by any chance?
Of course.
Billy Blanks, King of the Kickboxers.
Absolutely.
Talon of the Eagle. TC2000. Unfortunately, not in Expect No Mercy, a movie he starred in, but wasn't in the game.
That's not on your list, right? Expect No Mercy.
That's exactly what's on my list, John. No, it's not.
Okay, so we played that.
Yeah,
Something else.
unfortunately. But I did pick up Billy's Boot Camp, We the Enjoy the Diet. So goes back to those. This is for We. We the Enjoy Diet.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's not an amazing game. Let's not kid anyone. This is not a joke. But it kind of brought me back to the era where we had the Wii Fits. We had all these things. And I think there's something to these rhythm games. I had fun with it. And it didn't really help my diet so much. But it allowed me to...
It failed.
It failed completely, actually, because I'm here. And I look like this still. But it was fun to play it. And I actually do think there's some merit to those Fit games, though. Even though it didn't work on me, they were fun to play. VV, my dear VV, enjoyed it as well. Mostly because of Billy Blanks. But yeah, if you're into Taibo and the Wii, please do pick up Billy's Boot Camp.
Yes, there's two things specifically.
I'm not joking.
Taibo
It
and
is
the
pretty
Wii.
good. Yes.
I love that. Okay, and for me though, another one, Mega CD game, Bari Arm.
Bari Arm, yeah.
Which I think, what is it called? It's like, it has a very generic name in the West.
Arm Assault something? Aerial Assault?
Android Assault.
Android
That's
Assault.
what it is.
Yeah.
Android Assault.
The game, though, when you boot it up in America, I think still says Bari Arm.
Still says Bari Arm, I believe. But yes, so you know some details about this, but also, from my perspective, it's a more Gradius style shooter, but it's a horizontal shooter, kind of open-ended somewhat. You collect power-ups and you sort of eventually evolve into a mech, so to speak. But you have different levels and you add different power-ups from there. Fairly simple and straightforward, but the visual style and the musical style is just sublime. There's so much parallax scrolling in this game. It's really, really rich. The first level is this colorful green area. You've got underwater sections, this beautiful boss, and then the next you're going through all these shafts up and down and through all around like that. And then there's an assault on a spaceship, and it's just traditional shooter stuff, but the presentation is kind of a step above most other shooters from this era. Like more than I expected. It's just the color usage and the soundtrack and everything. It really, really works for me. It's excellent. But you know a bit more about this. I wasn't that familiar with this game
because
before.
this game uses... I'm not sure if you worked on it, but there's an artist in Japan called Obari, who Bari Arm definitely does allude to this, and his mechanical designs are really good. He did the artwork for the Toshinden anime and the Angel Blade, which is a pretty nasty one. But he also worked on Go Kaiser on Neo Geo. So he's a big legend in Japan, and these mechanical designs are definitely based on him. I met him, and I never got a clear answer whether or not he worked on the game, but I suspect there's something there.
That is interesting.
Well, he's still in Japan, still active, and a legend, absolute legend.
That's cool, and that's definitely one to check out. I think if you get a copy, it's not the cheapest game, but it's not that expensive.
It's definitely one.
And honestly, there's other, if you have a Mega SD or some other way, it's worth checking out regardless. It's
a Japanese really cool or English edition is the same, so
they're exactly the same, so it really doesn't matter. But it's definitely one of the shooters that surprised me the most this year, and that I'd only heard about it in passing and only as like Android Assault. It's like, yeah, it's okay, but really the name
it's no Heavy Noah, is it?
Oh gosh. I'll talk about Heavy Noah So what about, let's see, we got, okay, you got some crazy stuff coming up.
So, John, I'm also really into games that aren't Space Harrier, but place like Space Harrier. I do like Space Harrier, but I'm more into the ones that aren't. So like Cosmic Epsilon and all these games on Famicom. One that I did pick up was Attack Animal Gakuen, which is a Space Harrier clone where you play as a woman flying through space and time, basically, with a gun, fighting off animals.
That doesn't sound that different from Space Harrier.
It doesn't, and it plays very similar. Sounds very similar. It's a fairly good game, and it does use the Famicom 3D glasses, which our friends at My Life in Gaming try to play it with that, and it works fairly well.
That's good.
And I was really into this. I don't know why I love everything that isn't Space Harrier, but I do. And I will continue to collect them.
And speaking of that, another one I picked up this year. Now, I was familiar with the game before, but I got a different conversion of it. It's Night Striker. So Night Striker is an awesome Taito game with this just like, it's basically like Blade Runner meets Space Harrier.
Pretty much.
You're flying like a car and like blasting things through this like nighttime city with this killer Zuntata composed soundtrack. Yeah, Taito's in-house band, by the way.
We should mention that we love Zuntata.
Yeah, that's great music. Taito games, especially from this era, like just amazing music. Actually, they've never really faded. They're still around. Amazing music. And this is no exception. But the Mega CD version, I kind of had avoided this for so long, just in the sense that I'm thinking, how good could a Superscaler style game be? Especially when you saw some of the other conversions or less than beautifully handled titles like Space Harrier 2, which is
it's not the best, is it?
But they use some of the tricks of the Mega CD hardware to do some really interesting effects. So the ground itself is handled differently than the rest of the sprites, and that actually updates fairly smoothly, and it's a large full screen. The sprites themselves then also scale nicely in and out of the image, and the frame rate is a lot higher than typical of these types of games. But the caveat is that the resolution of the sprites is very low. Yeah. Like half or quarter res compared to what they are in the arcade. So it's a very chunky looking game, which means it's not amazing looking necessarily, but when you see the fluidity and see everything in motion, for the system that it was ported to, I actually think it's a really nice version. And it has the arranged soundtrack.
Yeah, the soundtrack alone is worth picking up this game for.
The PlayStation and Saturn versions do not have this.
No. Yeah, the arranged soundtrack is definitely the reason to buy this game.
So it's a cool version. I was kind of impressed with it. I also was spent some time playing through the original Ninja Warriors on Mega CD, which is not an amazing game.
No.
The new one on the remake of the Super NES game on Switch, that's the one to play. But the Sega Mega CD version has again an incredible arranged soundtrack. It's pretty much like an album.
Yeah, it's actually marketed as such. If you turn the cover around, it does have the Zuntata information on it. Zuntata. Which I think is a clever way of kind of getting around the fact that the arcade game isn't the best, but...
It's a good conversion of the arcade game, though. It's just not...
An interactive music album, basically. So you should ask Rich sometimes what Mean Machines thought of Night Striker.
Okay. So we also had a chance to play Thunder in Paradise this year.
Yes, I mean, the greatest show on television. I watched the one and only season when it came out. I'm not sure why they didn't renew that for another season. Germany was really into it, though.
That's true, and that's why we played it here.
Yeah, so this was the infamous game that got me into trouble in the airport.
Oh yeah, you tried to bring. There's a light gun for it.
The Peacekeeper. Which was a Mad Dog great kill. Yeah.
With Thunder in Paradise, and you tried to bring it over here.
I tried to bring it in my check-in luggage.
They didn't like that.
The alarm went off. I had to go into screening and questioning, and they asked me, "What is this for?" And I said, "The CDI." And they said, "What is that?" "A video game console. What's some popular games on it?" And for some reason, I said Burn Cycle and The Apprentice.
Which is
instead of Mario and Zelda.
You should have just said Mario and Zelda, but really...
I wasn't raised right.
You eventually got it here somehow.
I smuggled it in the Sega Flashback package.
But needless to say, it's a pretty terrible game. But it has very high quality FMV.
Yeah.
Some of the situations are kind of fun. Though this boat sequence at the beginning is just
It's unfortunate
awful.
Because the actual light gun sequences... so first of all, you mentioned that the Peacekeeper itself, the calibration is very good.
Yes, but it's an interesting one because it's also IR based.
It's IR based.
So this is a time when light guns worked with CRTs. Like you get a gun con or something.
Right.
It doesn't use IR.
No.
IR is what the Wii mode ended up using, and that's exactly what you use here with the CDI light gun. It's actually a small pack you place over your TV.
Yeah, and if they just had done the light gun stages where you shoot people, it would have been like any other, like Crime Patrol or Mad Dog McCree, but just with Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, exactly.
So it would have been a bestseller. But for some reason, they didn't do that. They took that boat sequence at the beginning, which is baffling because it's so terrible.
It's interactive television, brother.
It is.
So yes, but another one I seriously want to talk about in terms of quality is I got a copy of Elevator Action Returns on the Saturn.
Yeah, man.
After hearing about this for so long, again, thanks to a good I guess online friend that helped me obtain this for a price that was not unreasonable.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this one more than perhaps any other really lived up to the hype for me.
Yeah.
This is a phenomenal game. It's elevator action. You're basically making your way from the start, defusing bombs kind of along the way, and it's set up like this, like you see. But somehow, it's so satisfying to control. Like, moving in and out of the door frames, ducking, taking the elevators, shooting guys. Mm-hmm. The way the camera's zoomed out just makes it... You always have, like, a lay of the land, so to speak. And there's just all these finely crafted scenarios you're going through, backed up with this super smooth action and just an amazing co-op experience.
The best co-op experience I've had all year.
Yeah, it really is. It's a phenomenal game. It's so good that I really feel like it's a game that needs to get re-released now, like on a modern console, with support for multiplayer. It's really baffling that it's kind of not shown up too often because it's...
I mean, I was familiar with it. The elevator action I like a lot, the original. But Returns I've always heard about as being like a holy grail for the Saturn.
Yeah.
And obviously never played it until you put it on. But wow, yeah, best experience I had all year.
Plus the sprite work.
Oh yeah,
it's from that era. It's like mid '90s kind of when arcade games were starting to push a lot of frames of animation and really like ramping things up to a new level. Even though 3D was the new hotness, like the 2D games coming out at that time were some of the best looking you'd ever seen, and this is one of those. Plus, it's got this amazing soundtrack.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Saturn just keeps on giving because there's so many games, especially for 2D games. It's just, it never ends, does it?
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, so you showed off your PC-98 copy of Doom. I do have a few other PC-98 copies I picked up this year that I've been looking for a long time. We will get to the PC-98 in the future.
Someday. Just 'cause it's a fascinating machine.
It's very fascinating, and I have a lot of it.
There are some games we may not be able to show on this channel. We'll see.
But we'll see how we get around that. But I spent a lot of my life researching and dealing with the preservation of PC-98 in Japan. Kind of how we got to know each other in the beginning also. And I picked up two games, Briganti and Edge.
Okay.
I won't say too much about them because I do think those are two of the games that we will go into depth about later. But they are kind of side-scrolling action games, something that the PC-98 didn't deal with too well in the beginning.
Yeah, the PC-98 is weird because it does use sort of like typical PC CPU hardware, like the Intel-based systems, but the graphics hardware is PC-98 specific.
Right.
It's not like the VGA standard, so it has some positives and negatives. It has advantages, but also, it's not super well suited for fast side-scrolling action games. It's not that the PC was prior to, say, 94 and up.
No, but the PC-98 took longer to kind of get there than what the American side did. But as you can see in the footage here, very impressive games, but we'll get to them in detail later on.
Yeah. A couple others that... Somehow I skipped this one back in the day. Again, it's one of those weird ones. So Batman for the Mega Drive, Sunsoft Batman. So there's a lot of Batman games right there. I always loved the NES games. I liked Dynamite Batman or Return of the Joker, Revenge of the Joker on NES and Game Boy and everything. And then we got into there was Batman Returns for Mega Drive.
By Malibu,
which is
interactive, huh?
Awful game. It looks and sounds terrible. The Sega CD version is better because of the driving stages, which are completely separate. Thankfully, you can turn off the 2D sections. But somehow I never really got into regular Batman from Sunsoft. but this year I finally played all the way through it, and man, it's a tight little game.
Yeah.
Beautiful aesthetic and just a remarkable Sunsoft soundtrack.
Isn't it funny because both you and I had that experience that we both referenced in the Nintendo game a lot, the NES game, and we both were like, what about this Genesis game though?
Yeah.
And then when we played it...
It's one that I've always known about, but somehow it never really sunk in. It's like, oh yeah, this is something I should play. Like,
right.
I guess it's just this...
It's just overshadowed.
This perception where Sunsoft was amazing on the 8-bit Famicom NES, but they started farming things out to Western teams in the 16-bit generation, and a lot of those games are not great. There's a port of the Dynamite Batman to the Mega Drive.
Well, yeah, Dynamite Batman being Return of the Joker in Japan.
Yes. And it's horrible on there.
Yeah,
it's
awful,
absolutely atrocious. But the regular game, it's very short. It's fairly simplistic, but it's very satisfying to play, and it just has... It's almost... It kind of... I always liken it to a simplified take on Shinobi.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like Revenge of Shinobi, but
yeah.
more simplified, but with a really killer Sunsoft soundtrack. And it really works.
I think it's one of the strongest Sunsoft 16-bit games ever made. I mean, as you mentioned, in the 16-bit era, they really didn't make the impact.
They kind of disappeared somewhat, unfortunately.
They did bounce back on the PlayStation with the Note, though.
Yeah, okay, that's another thing I got recently.
Yes.
Very interesting survival horror game.
But John, you have not mentioned the game that made the most impact on me that you got.
What's that?
Rise 2.
No, yeah, okay, yeah. That's pretty funny. Yeah, when I was out in LA for E3, I stopped at
Game Dude.
Game Dude, of course. And one of the games I picked up there is a Japanese Saturn copy of Rise 2 Resurrection. Rise of the Robots is one of those legendary games. We've all had a laugh about it. It was so hyped, but it's one of the worst fighting games I've ever played. It's atrocious.
Until you play Expect No Mercy.
Yeah. They tried to come back with Rise 2, and to be fair, it's a significantly better game. But just because it's better than Rise of the Robots doesn't mean it's a good fighting game.
No, I think Zero Divide kind of killed the Rise of the Robots
oh yeah, Zero
franchise,
Divide is not super popular, but it was a cool robot-driven fighting game from early on the system.
The Saturn game is especially interesting. It's like Virtua Fighter with robots.
Pretty much. Well, isn't that virtual? No, just kidding. But yes, it is kind of like that. And yeah, Rise 2, they keep advertising everywhere that it has music from Brian May, Queen, and
just like a couple tracks in there that he made
not great.
on Afternoon.
It's not a great game. It's a funny game, but it's really not great.
I'm not curious, did that hype reach the US though? Because here in Europe, the Rise of the Robots...
It was all over magazines in the US as well. It was definitely a big deal. And it was always the same CGI shots.
Yeah, always.
Where they sort of like position as like next generation visuals, but in reality, it's a terrible game. And Rise 2, again, better, but still bad.
Yeah, it's so mediocre, but it's interesting to see that they at least tried. And it comes in the long box on the PlayStation.
That's right. So yeah, I mean, there's other games I could talk about as well.
Lots of experience.
I've built a retro PC this year, and I spent a lot of time going back through some of my favorites. But overall, it's been a really good year for retro gaming for me, and that's only scratching the surface of what I've spent time playing. I've spent more time, I think, playing through retro games than modern games.
Same. I mean,
outside of something like Death Stranding, where I was quite invested in that one.
I enjoyed watching you play that.
That's cool.
But yeah, I think my best retro experience this year, though, John, would be that I got to share a stage with you at EGX, you and Richard Jollybetter.
Oh yeah, we did that.
And we got to talk about arcade conversions to the C64 and Amiga, and
interesting.
Yeah, being there on stage with my best friend and a guy I looked up to throughout my life, reading Mean Machines and knowing his work throughout the ages.
That's right.
Big moment for me. So thank you, John, and hope 2020 continues this good stuff.
For more retro gaming. That's going to do it for now, though. I think we've waxed poetic a little bit about these random retro games.
We hinted at quite a few new DF retro episodes coming in 2020, so end the year on a good note.
Absolutely. But if you enjoyed this video, as always, be sure to like and subscribe, ring the notification bell, and follow us over on Twitter. And until next time, stay retro.